Logan Paul, one of the biggest mainstream content creators of the last decade, had his career seriously threatened when he nonchalantly reacted to a deceased person's body on video. But what if nonchalantly reacting to things unspeakably worse than a simple body was what you did in every video? This is what YouTuber Plagued Moth is known for, rather was known for, before he mired himself in so much drama that it destroyed his career. Though his channel was created all the way back in 2011, it spent most of its existence in inactivity. The first upload, or at least the first that's still up, is a gameplay of Silent Hill from 2018, a signal of Moth's interest in the dark and sinister. Despite this, it took another 2 years until he began uploading regularly, with the release of the first episode of his Weird Web miniseries. In it, he covered relatively well-known horror tuber staples like the Shea St. John art project. The video was unedited and had loud background noise, almost like a low production value live stream instead of a video. It was clear Moth didn't have the recipe for success from the get-go, and he must have figured this out since what he lacked in quality, he made up for in dedication. He tried his hand at anything to become a successful content creator, from ASMR to creepypasta readings and even YouTuber drama coverage. Eventually, Moth finally found himself a niche: contemporary true crime commentary. Specifically, his video covering a case of a streamer who killed his girlfriend for a $1,000 donation got a lot more views than Moth was used to, which he took as a sign he should double down on this kind of content. And he did take this doubling down pretty literally at first, since he made 3 follow-up videos rehashing and updating the same story. As unusually successful as these videos were for his standards, his channel only went to the next level in 2021, when he covered 2 notorious cases of people recording themselves taking their own lives in a particularly brutal fashion. For context, much like ElsaGate, there are gore communities operating right under YouTube's radar. Since the platform doesn't allow any kind of gore to be posted, the consumers of that kind of content find creative ways to bypass it, like uploading an animated recreation or just audio of a given video. The comparison to ElsaGate is relevant insofar as there are many examples of this kind of content being clearly made by kids or with kids as a target audience based on how it's packaged. It's impossible to say how large this niche is, but given how prevalent memes about seeing gore and shock videos as a little kid are, it's probably much larger than you'd expect. All of this is to say that this demographic was heavily capitalized on by Moth's video, especially since he goes into minute detail about what happened in the footage and the footage's background stories. These factors compounded, and the video quickly got over 1 million views, though it now sits at over 2.5 million. Just like he did the first time, he decided to double down on this kind of content to try and replicate its success, narrowing his scope from general true crime to cases where a heinous incident was caught on camera. His next 2 videos that revolved around this theme both got over 500,000 views, so it was clear what the path moving forward was. But unlike most other true crime content creators, Moth had a conspicuous, and some say disrespectful, tone to his coverage. Besides the over-the-top gross horror movie aesthetic he used as packaging, he laced his presentation with a hot topic edginess that took away from the seriousness of the crimes he covered. In his description of a murder case in Brazil, he said, "A terrible murder was overlooked because it happened in Brazil in 2007, when Daniel Petrie tortured and eventually murdered 12-year-old Gabriel Kuhn over being scammed out of an MMORPG currency. It surprisingly wasn't Raid Shadow Legends." Obviously, this is a joke, and it doesn't mean that Moth supports this activity, but still, most true crime content creators dislike this approach. The only people who respond positively to this attitude are desensitized teenagers who are too immature to understand the gravity of these crimes and are tuning in purely out of morbid curiosity. While making risque content was his strategy to get attention on YouTube, over on Twitter, he was trying to get on the radar of bigger YouTubers by basically becoming omnipresent in their mentions. At first, he tried Mutahar, but when Muta didn't budge, he simply switched over to Wendigoon. After multiple failed attempts, weepy self-pitying complaints about it, and doing the same video format as Wendigoon, the Wendig glazing finally showed results. In May, Wendigoon relented and gave him not only a collab video, but a sponsored video that got uploaded to Wendigoon's channel. This is as big a privileged position as Moth could possibly aspire to, and everything was coming together for him to become another staple personality in the community of dark and obscure content. However, right around the same time, Moth began sowing the seeds of his own destruction. In mid-2021, he decided that just describing violent videos in painstaking detail wasn't enough, as he graduated to actually showing parts of them, only keeping the really bloody parts censored. Eventually, he decided that this wasn't enough either, and went on to record himself live reacting to full videos, blurring them out but letting the audio play unedited, meaning you could still hear whatever was happening in the video. In all fairness, Moth was doing something no one else is really doing. The only issue is that there's a reason why no one else does that. Because it's a bad idea. No other person in this makeshift community, from people who cover goofy ARGs to those like Nick Crowley who cover real Zoosadist circles, would turn real murder into a spectator sport. Not because it's controversial and daring, but because because it's a dumb idea for a multitude of reasons. To make matters worse, Moth could often be seen giggling and cracking jokes while he watched people get tortured. This particular video he's reacting to is the Azov crucifixion, which was widely claimed to be faked. But Moth himself in the video suggests that its authenticity is simply unverified, meaning he acknowledges the possibility, however remote, that he could have just reacted in that manner to a real video of a person being crucified. But if that video possibly being fake makes it tolerable, Moth immediately goes on to cover very real videos while making the same kind of offhand remarks. One of Moth's worst offenses, and one that would come back to bite him later, is when he reacted to a video of a 15-year-old girl being stomped on her head by a mugger while giggling and counting the stomps like Sesame Street Dracula, even titling the video after it.
And I'm going to do something more messed up. I'm going to count how many stomps actually happened because I'm curious. You can judge me all you want. You kindly don't care at this point.
Even if he tries to play this down and claim that this video is being misconstrued, this is how he himself described it in a reply he made to someone claiming he only supported the LGBT for clout. Bitch, I cackled like a hyena while a girl got her skull stomped in. Screw YouTube and screw you. Moth truly supports LGBTQ and trans rights. Let people be who they are. There's some speculation about whether or not the victim of the attack actually died as a consequence, but regardless, it's a brutal act happening to a minor, and Moth saw fit to not only watch it, but react to it like it was a Fine Bros video. This definitely crossed whatever the line is that separates covering cases and consuming violent crimes as entertainment. Within a month of that upload, he reacted to an entire mixtape of child abuse material and had the original audio play throughout the video. It's not like this is the only thing he could do that got views, so there's no good reason for him to be so laser focused on reacting to real-life abuse caught on tape. As a matter of fact, due to the nature of the content, his videos would often get age restricted and demonetized for obvious reasons. But how did he make his money, you may ask? Well, there's his merch store where he actually sold items that directly referred to gore videos, which is pretty sketchy to say the least, but as he himself acknowledged, his main source of income was Patreon, which went from $1,000 in January 2021 to over $4,000 in June, to allegedly over $10,000 in August. The perks were pretty basic. You get access to bonus videos, behind-the-scenes vlogs, and premium Discord benefits. In July, his Patreon was temporarily shut down, and he posted a message to his private Discord server commenting on it, saying, "The Patreon is temporarily shut down. It's okay because we needed some changes around here. I'm appealing the takedown, and if we have to rebuild, so be it. If we get the same page back, awesome. But regardless, this will be the new format for the Patreon." Right after, he clarifies what you get with the higher tier's premium Discord benefits: uncensored gore and access to the full mixtapes and clips he's reacting to in the videos. Based on this alone, we can deduce that this was the reason for his Patreon being taken down, as the distribution of graphic, sadistic, and violent imagery is expressly forbidden by Patreon's terms of service. Despite having a wife and multiple kids to provide for, he continues to jeopardize his main source of income by disobeying Patreon's rules and instead circumventing them by hosting the videos on Mega and emailing them to his patrons. Ethical questions aside, this is just plain stupid and irresponsible. User UglyGremlin69 on Kiwi Farms was seemingly responsible for the Discord leaks, proving that this was happening to those outside of Moth's inner circle, and he then proceeded to dump the 3 most suspicious channels to the farms. One of the messages from these leaks shows him speaking about getting the child abuse tape from the dark web, which is something he said in the video as well, following it up by claiming he sent a tip to the FBI about it. I don't really understand how it can be bad enough that he tips the FBI off, but it's not so bad he can't download it from a dark web distributor and then send it to his own audience. At that point, how far off are you from distributing child abuse material to sadists? He's reacting to animal abuse, and those kinds of people will obsessively look for content pertaining to their interests. So how do you ensure that you're not getting those kinds of people as an audience? The answer is you can't, and he just didn't care. At the beginning of that same video, he clearly states that he will find a way to continue providing uncensored content to his followers, despite whatever issues may come up with the Patreon. Despite the pretty decent amount of money he was making at this point, there were no real improvements to his production value. The video's packaging and editing were still much very amateur. It sure didn't look like he had someone else editing for him, so he probably was doing it all by himself at zero cost, keeping all of the money. Smart business tactic, if I do say so myself. There was so much backlash from the child abuse mixtape video that it pushed Moth to make a follow-up explaining why that kind of content is legal and doesn't qualify as child exploitation because it's not sexual. But of course, this isn't a very strong point, since there are many people who consume sadist content for gratification. He was clearly developing an audience of actual degenerates, and he was fine profiting off of them. But that's not even all of it. People in the comments and in Kiwi Farms pointed out Moth was being a little facetious when he claimed that the tape didn't contain anything sexual, alleging he forgot to mention in both of his mixtape videos that the ending also includes a track from Pseudo Scorpion, which is a notorious album that includes sounds from Now, I personally believe he left that tiny little detail out on purpose because he previously had made a video talking about Pseudo Scorpion and stating that it's illegal. That's also wrong. In the USA where he lives, it's completely legal, and didn't want to look like a moron, not realizing that ship has long sailed. However, by doing so and getting attention to the said mixtape, he has put many people in danger who go out looking for the mixtape because child exploitation laws vary by country, and many have that on the same level as CP. As for the creator of the mixtapes, it's Jack Hack. He was, or maybe still is, a very frequent poster on Cold Raven's Discord, and he chatted a lot with Moth in the underground server as well. Moth has admitted to receiving the two mixtapes originally from this individual. Cold Raven's Discord server's history is filled with this guy, Jack Hack, bragging to have seen the mixtape when Moth made the video about it, and back then, pretty much nobody had it. It was only ever leaked like half a year ago on Bestgore by Jack Hack himself. I can't verify that, but the writing of the person on Bestgore was identical to that of Jack Hack. It's pretty common knowledge for anyone in the Mondo/Gore community by now who is making that absolute garbage, so it's disgusting for him to try and downplay it as some mystery only for clicks. I have to disclaim here that this post is an allegation, but if true, it means Moth was closer to the person who provided those videos than he initially let on. In another post, that same KF user alleged to have been directly in touch with Moth for some period of time and was familiar with who was in his community, which would strengthen his claim. Besides the creation of a side project channel where he posted a now unlisted Chris Chan video, Moth's online activity went on as usual, with him dropping yet another mixtape reaction video immediately after the controversy surrounding the first one. However, business as usual came to a screeching halt in November when Moth posted a short video to TikTok and YouTube, informing his followers that his 4-year-old daughter was suddenly diagnosed with a life-threatening case of type 1 diabetes. According to Moth, they were having to pay for everything out of pocket since they didn't have health insurance. It comes as a bit of a surprise that, despite the money he was making at this point, he didn't have insurance, but regardless, this is absolutely terrible and it really shouldn't be joked about. I'm only mentioning this for context since it will be brought up later. And fortunately, his daughter got better and got treatment for her condition. As a consequence of this news, you can see just from the comments that Moth got a lot of support, not only from his own audience, but also from other content creators during this situation. But not everyone was as keen on suspending their criticisms of Moth because he was going through a tough time. A few weeks prior to this incident, a thread on r/horror got the ball rolling on the conversation about Moth, where users said, he started off with true crime stuff like Junko Furuta and the murder of Bianca Devins. It was really interesting to watch, but he took it a step further and added Patreon exclusives where you can view the actual gore and murder while he commentates. First off, this is wildly disrespectful to the victims. He's essentially profiting off of the gruesome deaths of others. I'm sure they'd appreciate to rest instead of being paid to be seen murdered by people on the internet. Second, he's become distasteful. In a video, a girl gets stomped to death and he titled it Counting with Moth and counted the stomps while laughing. Third, this is some sick stuff. Who wants to pay to watch people get gruesomely killed? I don't know where else to post this, but I'd like to hear people's opinions on this. I find it disturbing and insensitive. I watch this stuff because of Wendigoon. I'm still subbed to Moth, but it's rough. His tagline is, the most controversial commentary on YouTube. It isn't. It's just gore breakdowns. And to add to the problem, it feels like 50% of the video is just his drawn-out intro with self-promotion to his Patreon, plus the screw the haters, I'ma be me speech he gives in every video. And then 30% of the video is him rambling and repeating things he said. The rest is actual content. I want to support a small creator that's putting in the work to build something, but Plagued Moth just makes it difficult. Can't stand him. Can't believe I was ever subbed. I saw he even made merch on his TikTok about a shock video. Really disrespectful. As you can see, many of the people who are now criticizing him were, at one point, fans of his, or at least people who got into his content with an open mind due to his collaboration with Wendigoon, only to find that Moth's approach was inappropriate for the kind of content he did. This wasn't the only Reddit-based controversy Moth found himself embroiled in, as in a post of his from April 2021, he said he'd watched a video called Dig Your Roots, and went into details as to what it contained, eventually making a video about it. The only thing is, this video never existed. Dig Your Roots was made up by a 4chan thread on the paranormal board where users were trying to make up fake lost media. As it turned out, Moth was repeating false information verbatim, presumably because he read the summary of the fake video somewhere. 2 months after his Reddit post, he explained what happened, claiming his mind played a game of telephone with itself and that he'd overlaid the fake story of Dig Your Roots onto another real video. The real video in question was one particular particularly controversial clip uploaded by WorldCorp, a project that's widely known as an ARG despite not really being one. It's understandable why, since it has a very obscure and mysterious vibe to it. In the WorldCorp clip, a child can be heard screaming in what appears to be a dimly lit bathroom while someone outside is recording and yelling at them. It's pretty disturbing, and it really blew up after a fake story about it having come from a dark web website was widely reported by big channels on YouTube. Eventually, this story was put out to pasture as a different one came to light. The creator of WorldCorp, allegedly Money Goblin from the autistic Money Boys clan, was the person recording the video, and the kid screaming was his little brother, who was speculated to be getting hit with cold or hot water from the shower. Moth himself was one of the few people who brought this story forward, and according to him, he got it directly from the people running WorldCorp. Of course, this still raises a few issues since the screams in the video seem quite real, meaning despite there being no evidence whatsoever that this was many speculated it still could be some kind of illicit video. The other issue with this whole thing is that the WorldCorp video is nothing like the Dig Your Roots video described on Reddit by Moth, especially since he didn't just vaguely remember it, but specify details of it, such as the pattern of the bed sheets on the supposed victims in the video. While many people already disliked Moth's content and personality because of these issues, it took a bit for others to get on his case and call him out. One of the first to do it was a channel called Jimmy J, who made a video covering the Dig Your Roots situation and criticizing others of Moth's behavior, such as him asking for nudes from his followers and having a channel on his Discord server for the same purpose. Some people claimed that this video expose on Moth is what led him to set the record straight on the Dig Your Roots video, which is incorrect since Jimmy's video came out almost half a year after Moth had already corrected himself. As for the accusations that Moth did those things, he made sure to specify in his tweets about it that you had to be over 18 and required people to actually show ID in order to be able to join the nudes channel on his Discord. So this wasn't a situation where minors were being exposed to images they shouldn't have been. If anything, this implication was a classic case of projecting from Jimmy J himself, since in November 2021, a few weeks prior to Jimmy's big expose video, a user named SimSum was posting to a Kiwi Farms thread that discussed Moth. His posts were not only very negative towards Moth, but specifically positive towards Jimmy's channel, which was strange due to how relatively irrelevant he was up until this point. Other users immediately picked up on this and speculated that SimSum and Jimmy were the same person, and despite disliking Moth, they took issue with the repeated baseless allegations that Moth was a groomer. Soon after, SimSum backed away from the Plague Moth discussion right around the same time that another account, Lorelei, popped up, doing the same exact pro-Jimmy anti-Moth act. In a post from January 1st, 2022, Lorelei said, "I'm 18 now, and Durfee is my best friend. She be 17. I don't want to read it that way, by the way, that's just how it's typed, so we're being accurate here, okay? I shouldn't go on the Discord with an adult, I guess, and I asked for it. Parentheses, sex talk with Plagued Moth. I mean, I asked for his attention, so yes, I'm dumb to do that, and sending my nude to him. Parentheses, Plagued Moth. Yes, I did that. You can call me a freak to do that, but I was attracted to him. I don't care if people calling me dumb. I was dumb. This was in March last year, 2021. I'm talking about Plagued Moth now, not Max Ma'am. But I'm freaking out on myself that I did this sex talking because of his crazy wife. I'm shitting my pants of her and Moth. I mean that I'm scared from the two of them. If you didn't catch that through the unique dialect, that was Lorelei claiming that she and maybe another underage friend of hers were both groomed by Plague Moth and were afraid to talk about it. Now, if you're wondering why that post reads like Nico Bellic from GTA 4 wrote it after getting hit in the head with a wrench, it's because that's probably Jimmy behind these posts doing his best to pretend that he's a teenage girl, but on one hand failing at that, and on the other very much succeeding at sounding like a Slavic immigrant with brain damage. After Lorelei was called out, a third account showed up called Love Long-Haired Cats, running the same scheme yet again, though more subtly this time, which allowed it to go unnoticed by the users for about a week. In the meantime, Jimmy, under his own name this time, started posting to the farms, reiterating his claims and saying that Moth was making false accusations about him and stalking him. He immediately ruined the credibility of his alt by having it reply to his own post pretending to be an unusually interested third party, with all the finesse of a developmentally disabled gorilla, which immediately allowed everyone else in the thread to figure out who was behind it. While the KF users sleuthed the usual ways to confirm what they already believed to be the case, they dug up everything they could on Jimmy, from the other online handles he used to his IP address and full docs. He sort of made it easy for them since he'd doxed his own face, but still, given the realistically criminal implications of the information I'm about to relay, it's best that his personal information be censored. As they trudged through his Reddit account, they found him posting the handle to his kick. By then investigating that handle, they found multiple posts on a site called Like that was used for the exchanging of CP. These posts, dating as far back as 2018, showed him replying to threads offering soliciting trades for megalinks with up to 2,500 videos of, and I quote, black young boys and girls. I'm assuming that this might have been what Jimmy was alluding to in his post to KF, claiming that Moth had been making false accusations about him. However, the possibility that Moth somehow fabricated these posts in order to frame Jimmy is pretty impossible, since they were from far before anyone even knew who Jimmy was. Further reinforcing the narrative that everything he said about Moth was projection, Jimmy had claimed multiple times that Moth was stalking and harassing a teenage girl. But as it turns out, Jimmy himself might have been doing exactly that. Initially, people didn't know it was Jimmy, as he was using one of his alts called Soldier Sam Evil Exposed. Regardless, an alleged 16-year-old girl he'd been interacting with online was asked if Sam made her feel uncomfortable, to which she replied, saying yes. Later on, when the Soldier Sam account was connected to Jimmy's alt, SimSum, another KF user claimed that this girl had DM'd him in panic about him posting about her on Reddit. If that Kik connection holds up and truly belonged to Jimmy, I can't imagine it being anything good. I won't dedicate too much time to this guy, since the majority of his activity is just nonsensical schizo posting over multiple different alt accounts, many more than the ones I've mentioned, but it is pretty insane how adamant he was in trying to clear his name and attack Moth to randoms on Kiwi Farms, as if that would make a difference. But anyway, back to Moth. While it may be convenient to paint the anti-Moth narrative as a Kiwi Farms phenomenon, the general public's criticisms of Moth were already pretty prevalent on other websites, but regardless of where the criticisms came from, they were never welcomed by Moth. For example, when user Morphine Rat simply posited Moth had been acting weirder, Moth's wife Andrea replied, white knighting for him and gratuitously attacking the original poster. Now, however in bad form this may have been, it was just a drop in the bucket compared to what was about to come. On May 16th, a thread was created on the Mondo Gore subreddit, one of the largest gore communities, about their dislike for Plagued Moth. The thread quickly erupted in replies, people saying that his content was low effort and low production value, and his topics were saturated and rehashed as he repeatedly revisited stories. People also took issue with Moth's overtly edgy personality, with him calling himself things like the Gore God and Herder of Feelings. In an attempt to defend him from the onslaught, one person said, people need to realize his channel isn't for us seasoned watchers. His target audience is for the younger generation. He did get a lot of stuff wrong at the start, but his channel has grown a lot since. When I was growing up, it was basically impossible to find the backstories behind these videos. PM's channel is dedicated to finding the backstory behind these clips. Hate him if you want, but the youngsters like him. Oddly enough, despite being meant as a compliment and defense of Moth, the implication this makes is possibly far worse than anything anyone else had said. Over time, it became one of the most common points of Moth's detractors that, though he wasn't some kind of creep, he marketed as obviously inappropriate content to kids. It's at this point that his server becomes relevant once again. In June, a series of posts were made documenting the decommissioning of one of his server's mods, Fergie. It's not immediately clear what caused Fergie to fall out with Moth and lose his role, but it seems that there was some kind of standing order not to talk about it. Once Fergie was long gone and unable to defend himself in the server, Moth started occasionally addressing it, suggesting that Fergie was falsely accusing content creators of being PDF files, and was a PDF file himself, though he purposely remained somewhat vague on the topic. In one instance, he said, I'm God on here. Don't mess with what I've created. I come from nothing. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt to be stepped on because others are jealous of my success. If you screenshot stuff for a child who's involved with a P word, you aren't a part of my community. You can delete your pledge on Patreon, unsubscribe. I really don't care. If you're involved with a user named Derpasaur or Fergie, this applies to you. Later on, he alleged that Fergie had accused Moth and Cold Raven of allowing the distribution of illegal material, and was obsessed to the point that Moth was considering sending a cease and desist, something Moth claimed he had done to other people. Due to the lack of information, I can't give credence to either party here. While Moth did go on to establish a pattern of accusing the people he disliked of being PDF files, I just don't know what the case is. Almost half a year after their conflict began, in January 2022, Moth brought up Fergie again, claiming he watched and justified it as a study. At one point, Moth sent a disclaimer out to all users of his server, saying, if anyone with a username Fergie the one and only or anything of that variation messages you, please be warned that he is a PDF file who has a 14-year-old furry neo-Nazi boyfriend. Strangely enough, Moth expressed his willingness to show people pictures of this supposed underage boyfriend of Fergie's, which is pretty sketchy and not something anyone should do, and I can't really see how that could have been a joke or something. In other messages, Moth doxed Fergie and posted pictures of him to the Discord. For the time being, this was contained in Moth's Discord server, but this will come back up later. In late June, KiwiCube16, the same person who claimed Moth got his mixtapes from Jack Hack, made a post saying, I have a lot of insight regarding Moth as I was directly in touch with him for a while. Honestly, the most disgusting part of this entire thing is that he is 100% going for a minor-only audience. comments. Proof of that is his Discord, which is filled with they/thems and these cute flowery pictures as profile pictures. I'm sure you get the idea. On the final note, I find it quite hilarious that he now has multiple videos regarding mixtapes, yet he knew exactly who made the compilation that essentially boosted his entire career from the get-go. He still tries to downplay it to his minor-filled audience as some mysterious dark web thing, while we knew from the day it was given to him who made it, and he's admitted to knowing that as well. While we don't have access to the accurate age demographic breakdown of Moth's audience, based solely on how he packages and presents his videos, along with the people in the comments, it's clear that there are more than a few minors. Additionally, there were also minors in his Discord server, and we know that's the case since the Not Safe for Work channel is age verified, but the rest of the server is not. The presence of minors in and of itself isn't the only issue. The issue is that while they are protected from the sexual imagery by the ID verification process, they are exposed to the gore videos linked in the server, which will become a significant point of contention with Moth later on. During 2022, there was a noticeable push in Moth's general online persona to cater harder to an LGBT and left-wing audience, as he himself also came out as gender fluid. At one point, he even retweeted Keffels' call to deplatform Kiwi Farms. While not surprising in and of itself, it is pretty strange how he simultaneously markets himself as the most controversial YouTuber ever, an insensitive edgelord who watches people die for fun, and as a staunch ally who gets upset at misgendering. Also in June, a Vice article came out covering the gore community, focusing on Plagued Moth as one of its main representatives. Literally the first guy mentioned in the article. Overall, it's pretty neutral, but it further established him as one of, if not the main face of that content category. This irritated many of the community members who disliked that he was basically selected as their proxy, but in all fairness, some of his videos are gigantic in terms of popularity, so it was inevitable. Despite all of this negative sentiment swirling around on different websites, only in February 2024 did it become something that affected Moth. Now, a lot happens here in rapid succession, so I'll try to keep things at least as unconfusing as much as that's humanly possible. First, on the 12th of February, he uploaded a video titled, "Ripper has been identified." Ripper is someone he covered in a half-hour video from a few months prior, and to put it lightly, he was a hardcore PDF file and a distributor of that kind of content. This much is not disputed, but in his follow-up to his first video on Ripper, he claimed that Ripper was also Fergie from his Discord. His evidence was that multiple IP pings and a school email were connected to Ripper when he wasn't using a VPN, implying that these revealed Ripper and Fergie were the same person. I say presumably because at no point in the video does he explain how these IP pings were proven to be tied to Ripper or Fergie. I know showing someone's IP or email on YouTube counts as doxing, but there was simply no explanation for how Moth and the unnamed investigators he says provided him with this information drew this conclusion. Again, I have to repeat that they could be the same person, but Moth's video presents no concrete evidence. After 3 minutes of him repeating himself, he says that the FBI and local law enforcement have been notified, at which point he shows a Discord message of Fergie's, which has nothing to do with what he's talking about. This might have been a mistake in editing, or a sleight of hand on Moth's part, faking as if he was showing proof of what he was saying while showing something completely unrelated. What makes all of this even more suspicious is that while Moth does refer to Fergie as someone who'd been harassing and stalking him for 2 years, at no point does he mention that Fergie used to be a mod on his Discord server. Why not mention that part when it would obviously be very relevant? In this video, he also mentioned Jimmy J, who at this point has been pretty solidly tied to illegal activity. However, this is a bit of a Trojan horse, as Moth is bundling Jimmy's story with Fergie's despite being very different in degree of legitimacy and also being unrelated. Within a month of Moth's Ripper identified video, text-to-speech YouTuber Tethies made a nearly 1 hour-long documentary about Ripper that had its last section discuss the allegations that Ripper was Fergie. This section opens on a set of DMs coming from an account that allegedly belonged to Ripper, claiming that they weren't Fergie, but found it funny that now people would think that it was him. Tethies also focused on one supposed piece of evidence that Moth presented, that Ripper and Fergie were working on mixtapes simultaneously. This is already pretty feeble on its own as proof they're one and the same, but it's further discredited by Tethies, who explained that Ripper only began making these degenerate mixtapes in December of that year. Last but not least, in this same video, Tethies adds that Ripper is believed to be a 16-year-old Australian, unlike Fergie, who is American and of age. So much so that Moth has accused him of dating a minor. Of course, either or both sides of this discussion may be lying or being lied to, so it's good to take all of this with a grain of salt. However, Tethies did definitively do more to prove Ripper and Fergie aren't the same person than Moth did to prove that they are. To make a long story short, Plagued Moth might have falsely accused someone of being a PDF file and doxed them to thousands of members members in his Discord server. But even if that's not the case, then one of the mods on his Discord server, which was full of minors, was definitely an insane PDF file, and Moth neglected to mention this in his video whatsoever. Neither is too good of an alternative, to be honest. There's a lot more to Ripper's story, but since it's not directly related to Moth, we'll leave it at that and we'll get back to our main storyline. On the 28th of February, Moth uploaded a video notifying his audience that his Patreon account had been taken down. First, it was just hidden, and he had to undergo identity verification, but a week later, he was informed that it had gone down due to him using Patreon to share violent or graphic imagery via external platforms, reeling people in through Patreon and then directly linking them to uncensored gore via Discord. In his video about it, Moth claimed that he had no uncensored content anywhere, chalking this up to a smear campaign coming from Kiwi Farms users who were transphobic and hated him for being gender fluid. He also said that Fergie had something to do with it before he went on a rant about Patreon being in hot water for allowing maps or PDF files on their platform. This was actually reported on by right-wing news outlet Breitbart, which is strange since Moth is otherwise really dismissive of anything that comes from people remotely right-wing. I guess his political sensibilities wane when it's convenient for him. Regardless of how true or relevant this controversy involving Patreon is, Moth also mentions that they've profited off of zoo content. And I don't mean zoo as in Harambe going to the zoo having a fun time. I mean zoo as in animals in bad situations. And this isn't that much of an own, considering he himself has made content off of animals getting hurt videos himself. On Twitter, he once again blamed the age verification process and transphobia for his account going down, saying that he has pretty good evidence that this was the case, and going as far as to issue a lawsuit against the people behind his harassment, obviously a threat directed at Kiwi Farms. Moth was either lying, wrong on his assumptions, or both, as on the same day that the video about Patreon went up, fellow horror tuber That Creepy Reading, whom we'll be referring to as TCR, took to Twitter to announce the following. YouTuber Plagued Moth is lying in his most recent video. I alone reported his account with these screenshots I took from his Patreon server. I paid $5 and with zero age verification, I got access to these videos. In the attached images of this tweet, he provided multiple screenshots from Moth's Discord server showing direct links to real, extreme gore videos. TCR followed this up by saying, he has minors in his server who can get access to this content. Zero age verification required, so long as you have $5. This is not a troll attack. This was me doing what I feel is right to keep our community safe. This is not about gender. I was horrified after being autoplayed on YouTube into one girl 99 stomps counting with Plagued Moth. I heard rumors and then verified them to be true. Uncensored human death is not a product. You cannot sell it, and anyone who does really should not have the platform to do it. Plague, get help. TCR's claims were confirmed by Kiwi Farms user Goody, who provided a screenshot of those same links, but significantly less censored, proving they were original and not sourced from TCR's tweet. Goody then said, this was in his Discord around 2 months ago. I was there and I saw it. No age verification required for it. Other people are calling it out too. He literally removed it the same day the drama started. Like he deleted the channel and then streamed his Discord how, look, everything's fine here. He is lying. He can prove it with logs that this isn't true, by the way, but he will never do it. Meanwhile, Moth got into a slap fight with TCR on Twitter, though his account has since been suspended, so we can only see TCR's posts. Still, we can easily infer what they were talking about. First, Moth changed his position from there was no gore anywhere to there was no gore on Patreon, which, though true, isn't really relevant, since after the first time he got in trouble with Patreon, he started linking the uncensored videos via third-party platforms and even announced that this would be his new model. Then, Moth mentioned the age of the videos, essentially claiming that this was double jeopardy, a mistake he made a long time ago and that he'd already gotten in trouble for, but fixed. TCR dispels this, claiming the screenshots were from 2 months prior, which is the same thing that the Farms user said, by the way. Someone challenges TCR to show his Patreon receipts to prove he had access to Moth's server, and he proceeded to do exactly that, showing that he could have only gotten access to those links after November 2022 when he first pledged. There's plenty of proof users were being referred to a channel in the Discord called Super Secret Videos that contained the uncensored versions long after 2021. If there were any replies past this point, we can no longer see them. But if one side of the argument began quickly backtracking, it was Moth's. Coming off of this exchange looking bad, Moth did a 1-hour live stream addressing the entire situation, which didn't do much to help. In the chat, he can be seen juxtaposing TCR's attack on him with him exposing PDF files, implying either that TCR was attacking him because he exposed PDF files, or that having PDF files exposed somehow made him immune to criticism. Then, Moth suggested that TCR's grudge against him was motivated by money, calling TCR a jealous brokey and accusing him of e-begging. Now, I'm not here to besmirch anyone's fundraising methods, but a guy whose primary source of income is reaction videos on Patreon, accusing someone else of being an e-beggar is pretty rich, or maybe bankrupt depending on how you look at it. Bragging about money and making fun of other people for not having as much was something Moth had a history of doing, as Reddit posts of his show. In one thread on r/Mondo that criticized him for profiting off of other people's deaths, he said, "Stay poor and miserable. Just made 10K. What are you doing? Oh right, Reddit. See you in 10 years. Every time someone dies. Why do you cry so much, you little..." It's very ironic that Moth never once stopped making fun of TCR for supposedly making no money and being an e-beggar, since within days of this drama erupting, he created a GoFundMe page for his fans to help him out with rent and medical issues. To be clear, there's no inherent problem with asking for money from your fans in situations like that, but Moth makes it hard to sympathize with him when he just relentlessly railed on someone else for supposedly e-begging. On the GoFundMe page, it specified that their savings were exhausted to buy their daughter an insulin pump, and that they were now facing eviction. An insulin pump is about $6,000 out of pocket, plus maintenance throughout the year, which is quite a bit of money. But did he only have $6,000 in savings? From what I understand, he was making a lot of money before his Patreon went bust. But we can give this a pass, since presumably he also had to pay for her to stay at the hospital a while prior, and he had talked about moving as well, which probably also hurt his finances. What's harder to understand is that he mentioned being evicted. In the state where he lives, the minimum amount of eviction notice time a landlord can give is 2 weeks. So either he and his family were already facing eviction before the Patreon went down, and he's now making it out as if the two were related, or he's just saying eviction hypothetically, as in, if I don't pay rent, then we might face eviction. Regardless, the page raised enough funds to pay the rent and late fees, and good for him. I hope this inspires him to be less harsh on the brokey community. Also, very early on in the stream, Moth claims that TCR accused him of selling which, based on what we saw so far, is simply not true. So much so that a day after the stream, he made it very clear in a tweet that he didn't believe this was the case. In this same stream, Moth himself demonstrates that there's no evidence of TCR claiming that. When he tried to find the specific tweet in which TCR supposedly said it, he failed, finding instead that TCR claimed Moth had access to CP, and though he never reviewed or reacted to it, had seen it. TCR speculates that this could have been a lie on Moth's part to sound edgier, eventually apologizing for even bringing it up in the first place. For the time being, this part of the story is mired in uncertainty, but we're going to clarify later. During the stream, Moth showed his general chat and went over the rules to prove the gore claims weren't real, but given he's the owner of the server, he could have easily deleted the evidence. At least, this is what TCR suggested in his tweet from a day after the stream, asking for the audit logs from the past couple of days to see if he had used his admin powers to do anything like delete channels or messages from the server. These audit logs were never provided, and the stream only added to the conflict. He even randomly took a shot at Tuv, another commentary YouTuber, for distancing himself when the drama began.
Tuv and I aren't friends because Tuv got scared that he was going to be harassed because I was being harassed. He didn't want to be looked at as a bad person by associating with me. There you go. Can we stop talking about Tuv for some reason? If you're hyper-fixated on Tuv, go watch Tuv. Tuv is a typical grifting red tuber in my eyes anyway. He lies to his fans about content, including the video I was on. I'm been done with that for a while.
Meanwhile, on the TCR side of things, he made a response stream to Moth, though it's since gone down. What stayed up from this era are TCR tweets from the couple of weeks following the beginning of the debacle, and they help elucidate what was going on at the time. One point raised against TCR's narrative is that he once included audio originating from the Jim Jones cult video in one of his videos. However, he explained his reasoning, being that he did it when he himself was a minor, which suggested he wouldn't do it now and considers it insensitive to feature media from real victims in his videos. Regardless, my objective here isn't to defend TCR, but instead to analyze the validity of his claims. And him potentially being a hypocrite when he was a kid doesn't really change the point that you probably shouldn't record yourself laughing at a teenage girl getting stomped on and posted to YouTube. Things escalated from the Moth side of things, as he began to claim that TCR invited his audience to dox him and his family, followed by a heavy-handed, "You took medicine from a type 1 diabetic child, you transphobic piece of crap." TCR replied, saying, "Stop using your family as a shield for your behavior. They deserve better than that. You're the one dragging them into this, not me. I never invited anyone to dox Plagued Moth. The only one encouraging their audience to do anything is Plagued." While saying Moth was encouraging might have been a stretch, he was definitely allowing the people in a server to go above and beyond the call of duty, so to speak. For the first few days after the drama began, messages encouraging or wishing for physical violence to happen to TCR and one of Moth's detractors weren't punished. It was only after this issue was brought up on Twitter that this problem was adjusted for. I'm not really sure what the doxing accusation is supposed to be about, as in his stream, Moth only only mentions it at the end and claims TCR is insinuating he'll dox him, but no evidence of this was ever posted. This didn't prevent Moth from outright saying that TCR was harassing his family by calling multiple different police stations in Moth's area and telling them he owned CP. While there's no evidence TCR did this, there are a few strange things from Moth's end, such as him randomly calling TCR by his real name instead of his online handle, and at one point telling him, "Stay safe," and then saying the city that TCR lives in, and then following it up with, "That's a dangerous city, bro." While this isn't a threat per se, it doesn't exactly look great either.
No, this is not a dox. That is my city. I do geotag my stuff. I live in Pontiac, and he posted this Twitter thing at me. He had been beefing with me for a while, and he posted this in an attempt to make me feel unsafe.
Now, in mid-March, I personally had that creepy reading on one of my streams for half an hour, during which he laid this information out. He notably made one partial concession, that Moth had stopped producing new uncensored reactions to gore since 2021, but he maintained that the original ones were still available on the server. As TCR receded and seemingly backed off from the conflict, someone else threw their hat in the ring. On the 18th of March, YouTuber Lazy Bedhead dropped a 2.5-hour monster video about the situation. She begins by contextualizing some of Moth's forgotten or overlooked infractions, such as thumbnails of his that featured things like the real picture of Junko Furuta's deceased body and another one that consisted of a screenshot from a real zoo sadism video. There are some other criticisms here as well, such as the point that every once in a while, Moth would imply that the victim of a specific video somehow deserved it for putting themselves in a risky situation, such as getting themselves involved with the cartel. This is a minor point in the grand scheme of things, but still incredibly tone deaf of Moth to say. It's no secret criminal organizations frequently pressure and blackmail people into working with them, and the victims in at least some of these videos are police officers who were trying to arrest cartel members. Bedhead also offers some analysis of the finer details of Moth's original story, like that his Patreon account was first suspended because of a missed email about him verifying his ID. Bedhead notices that the email he shows already has the Patreon rep mentioning changes to his content, meaning the age verification never had anything to do with it. This doesn't change much about the selling gore to minors debacle, but it does add to the never-ending list of Moth's not-so-white lies. Then, she gets into the brunt of the TCR situation, bringing up the server's audit logs, as in theory, they would immediately disprove the claims that Moth deleted evidence. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be that simple. In his response to someone named Mango who was asking for them, he refused to provide the logs because it would somehow expose his patrons to attacks, whatever that means. Then, he called Mango a scammer. And this is an entirely different can of worms that I have no intention of getting into in this video, but the claim that Mango was a scammer came directly from someone who was accused of being a sexual harasser by multiple people. I'm not familiar with the merits of any of these accusations, so I won't comment on that, but Moth wasn't really familiar either, so he probably shouldn't have brought it up. After this, Moth was accused of misgendering one of the people criticizing him. Granted, this is so minute in comparison to everything else, but given how Moth had pandered to the kind of audience that's very sensitive about that kind of thing and pontificated endlessly about how all of the attacks on him were transphobic, this is something he 100% brought on himself. The cherry on top is that Moth's wife, Andrea, chimed in, as she often did, and started getting into it with the 16-year-old that Moth had allegedly misgendered. At one point, she said, "You posted false allegations against my husband that could have him murdered in front of our children. What do you think you're winning by that? Maybe you are overdue for some self-reflection." After this, Bedhead covered a few testimonies that weren't necessarily related to Moth's beef with TCR, but instead stories from people who were on his Discord server. One of them went by the name of Ram Ranch, who said that while Moth didn't groom anyone, he did occasionally talk about not safe for work topics in channels where minors could see. According to him, minors were the majority of people on the server, with just a few dozen adults at best. What adds to the gravity of the disproportionate age demographics of the server is that out of the entire moderator team, only one was an adult. While it was reiterated that Moth never groomed anyone, Ram Ranch did claim that Moth sporadically cheated on his wife with other adult members of the server. You might think that that's a bold claim to make purely off memory, but Mr. Ranch immediately goes on to say that he was accused by Moth of having asked 5 different times for CP because he made a Virgin Chad meme where Moth was the Virgin and Cold Raven was the Chad. Oh, how brutal. Another of the testimonies came from someone identified only as Anon B, who claimed Moth directly told him that he bought hentai stickers for his 14-year-old daughter. Anon B's other, much less substantial claim is that he was unwillingly tagged in ERP, erotic roleplay, by 2 other members of the server. Supposedly, when Anon B brought this issue to Moth, he got banned, apparently for having faked his ID and looking too young. On its face, this could be a case of negligent and irresponsible server management, but it gets worse. Anon B claims Moth went on to announce to the entire server that Anon B was a predator and a transphobe, and anyone caught associating associating with him would get banned. It's uncertain if any specific person was spreading this rumor or if Moth just conjured it out of thin air. I'll disclaim right now that this is an anonymous accuser that Lazy Bedhead featured in her video, so I'm just presenting this evidence as it's presented there, which is to say, it doesn't have a lot of evidence. And the reason I say that is because we're going to unfortunately return to one of the most convoluted aspects of this story: Fergie. Gotta open my gamer subs for this one. According to Anon B, the two people who exposed him to ERP were users named Fenrir and Fergie. At this point in her video, Bedhead reiterates Moth's claims that Fergie was a dark web PDF file. Though it could very well be true, it's not substantiated, at least not in Moth and Bedhead's videos. However, Bedhead does zero in on another of Moth's claims about Fergie, that he, along with his supposed neo-Nazi furry teenage boyfriend, were responsible for the creation of a controversial mixtape called MD Pope 5. The strange wrinkle to this story is that when they were collaborating, Wendigoon asked Moth if he had any involvement with the creation of MD Pope 5.
Plagued Moth, did you make the fake MD Pope 5?
No.
Okay.
Eventually, Moth did say that he knew someone from his community was responsible for it. It's never explained how he knew that it was someone from his community, but supposedly didn't know who it was, even though Fergie, whom he eventually said the tape came from, was one of his server's moderators. Even if he really didn't know at the time, how did he eventually find out? Or could it be that he always knew and simply, once again, was being dishonest about it? Ram Ranch claimed that not only did Moth specifically know Fergie was making it, but he encouraged him to make it and send it to big content creators. Now, last but not least, we have the issue of TCR's passing and baseless claim that Moth had access to E. Up until this point, the narrative was that this was a big mistake on TCR's part, and Moth was relentlessly beating him over the head with this mistake, even after he'd apologized for suggesting it. This narrative drastically changed with the drop of Bedhead's video, as she provided evidence that Moth himself, on his Discord server, said that the worst thing he'd ever seen was part of a video on 4chan by accident years prior. This is a problem, not just because it showed that Moth had been lying about this, but also because some speculate that it's impossible to view it by accident, as it's usually kept in password-protected files you have to go out of your way to crack, which clearly no one could do on accident. Whatever the case may be, it's certainly possible to accidentally be exposed to illegal content on accident, because sometimes people will post illegal content under the guise of it being something else. I'm not saying that this definitely happened in this case, but it's not impossible per se. In the wake of her video, Moth encouraged people on his Discord server to go and mass flag it, saying that it constituted slander and libel. Despite the evidence she presented, he continued to deny ever having watched illegal content, prompting her to release a screen recording where she showed the specific Discord message in which he said that he did, which was still up at the time of recording. The fallout of this was really bad for Moth. On the 1st of April 2023, he announced he'd booted over 4,000 people out of his Discord. This was either a performative and tacit admission to his server having a large amount of minors on it who needed to be banned, or an attempt to weed out any potential moles. This evidently did not work, since 3 days later, a complete server dump was posted to Kiwi Farms. In the screenshots that came from the Discord, he could be seen lamenting about how bereft his finances were as a consequence of everything that happened. While it's obviously terrible that his children, who aren't at all at fault for how any of this went down, may suffer as a consequence of this, Moth continuing to frame it as "the internet screwed me over" is about as insincere as you could possibly get. What happened here was a consequence of his actions and decisions, not some random instance of everyone ganging up on him gratuitously to destroy his livelihood. At this point, why would he even stay online? Why not just leave the internet forever and, I don't know, get a job? In retrospect, it would have been a great idea to do that, because from here on out, it just gets worse. After that creepy reading and Bedhead, a third person took the stand: Slime Beast. Slime Beast is something of a minor personality in the horror community, known mainly for authoring creepypastas. In May, over 2 months after the beginning of their beef, Moth decided to drudge it up again by making a 40-minute video targeting TCR. This didn't really change much, and it's mostly not worth getting into, but it is worth noting that it actually had the adverse effect to what Moth intended. By bringing up TCR again, Moth also attracted people's attention to himself and his own case, at which point Slime Beast reached out to him on Twitter, saying he was working on a video that involved the release of evidence, but he got no response. In it, Slime examined footage from a trailer Plagued Moth made to a video of his covering an infamous illegal content case, and concluded that footage was procured from the original video, meaning Moth must have had access to it or had it in his possession in some way. On Twitter, Moth first completely misinterpreted the claim Slime was making and started talking about the scream sound he used in the trailer, followed by his usual accusation that he was being attacked by transphobes. This is a side point, but Moth's trailer has weird metal music about little girls and the horniest stock scream sound effect playing over the very real introduction to a heinous video, which frankly is in as poor taste as you could humanly get. Moth went on to repeat his claim about the scream sound effect and then threatened to copyright strike Slime's video for slander, which, if you know anything about copyright and slander are not related at all. Eventually, he tweeted, "Who said anything about using footage from anything or a news report?" I take it that this is him slowly coming to the realization of what Slime actually claimed. In this same tweet, he claims that he got his visuals from a DuckDuckGo image search about the CP case. The problem with this claim is that the visuals he used for the trailer were clearly a video, not still images, so again, this explained nothing. After almost half an hour of addressing completely unrelated things, Moth finally came around to what Slime had actually said and claimed that he got all of his footage from a 60 Minutes piece on the PDF file he was going to cover in his video. And you know what? This would have immediately exonerated Moth, were it not for the fact that the clip shown in the 60 Minutes interview is a few seconds shorter and has the image on the bottom half of the screen blurred, presumably because it shows one of the victims. The visuals in Moth's trailer, however, have the bottom half cropped, goes on for slightly longer, and it appears to be slightly higher quality. If the bottom half was blurred like it was in the 60 Minutes interview, then why crop it? This is very strange, and honestly, I get how that would lead someone to think that Moth had access to the original, which of course is very much illegal. About a week after his first encounter, Moth dropped a 30-minute hit piece on Slimebeast, thinly disguised as a video essay. And when I say thinly, I do mean very, very thinly. He shows Reddit posts of Slime where he's mean to other people, accuses him of being misogynistic and transphobic for reasons that are unclear since the posts don't really show him doing any of that. Then he reads an obsessive stalker's post from the lolcow image board about Mr. Creepypasta and his wife, and claims that the person who posted them was actually Slimebeast. There is absolutely no evidence that this was the case, and Moth doesn't even make an effort to explain why he believes the post came from Slimebeast. The only possible connection between this poster and Slimebeast is that they both dislike Mr. Creepypasta, but then again, so do probably tens of thousands of people, because Mr. Creepypasta has like 1 million subscribers, and out of all of the people who have seen him exist, there's bound to be a few who don't like him. And from what we can see, Slime's beef with Mr. Creepypasta is over the unauthorized reading of Slime's creepypastas on his channel. Now, there's still some amount of debate as to whether Slimebeast's copyright striking of people who read his stories as legal, as Moth brings up how Slime apparently copyright striked another horror tuber, Nick's Fears. However, Moth claims this wasn't just DMCA abuse, but instead a transphobic attack against Nick's, which he shows no evidence for. The last part of this video is very contentious, as Moth accused Slimebeast of being a stalker and a PDF file. His evidence for this accusation was 2 DeviantArt images Slimebeast favorited, one of them being a not safe for work drawing that Moth said was lolly, and an image of a clothed real girl Moth claimed was clearly a minor. In his rebuttal video, Slimebeast showed that the not safe for work drawing was the adult artist depiction of herself, meaning it wasn't a child in any form, and the real girl, whose image Slime had favorited, was 20 years old, as Slime had already said multiple times and was easily verifiable. The only thing pointing to anything else regarding this was a clearly fake Slimebeast account that, at one point during Moth's stream about this, said, "Okay, the child was 13. There's a variety of factors that make it easy to verify that this account was fake, and in all likelihood, Moth probably knew this was the case. Otherwise, does Moth think that Slimebeast was constantly denying all the accusations and then randomly confess to all of the claims about him in his chat? In his own YouTube chat, only to then go right back to denying everything? Keep in mind, you can very easily click onto the comments made during the live stream to see that the account that posted that wasn't the same as Slimebeast's real account. There's also another insane aspect of this story, which is that Moth apparently decided that not only was Slimebeast a PDF file, he had also stalked the real girl whose picture he liked for 18 years, and his evidence for this was that the account that posted the image and Slimebeast's account were both created on the same year. Mind you, the account that posted that picture belonged not to the girl in question, but instead the person who photographed her, who happened to be a friend of Slime's and also an adult. To say that Moth was grasping at straws at this point is very generous. It's questionable if he even believed his own claims at any point, since they were so outlandish. Within a few weeks of these bouts of friction between Slime and Moth, it was revealed by TCR on Twitter that Moth had been sending cease and desist letters to his detractors. Cease and desist letters don't necessarily mean you're being sued yet, but still, it obviously suggested a legal threat. Within a month of that, Plague Moth's YouTube channel was actually taken down, initially for unknown reasons. One day after it happened, he took to Twitter to say, "My channel was terminated due to multiple false copyright strikes on my old creepypasta videos, and it was taken down by TCR and Slimebeast in order to silence my expose videos. This happened shortly after I sent them both a cease and desist." Slimebeast began to brag that he's about to watch a bomb go off, and TCR pinned a tweet showing my private URL of the video he false reported. TCR responded by asking for proof that he was behind the DMCA attacks, but as far as we can see, this proof proof was never provided. When another target of Moth's cease and desist letters decided to corner him on the subject, he repeatedly evaded the question. A few days later, Moth decided to turn his attention back to TCR to accuse him of being a PDF file who had harbored that Ripper character, which he still maintained was Fergie, even promising screenshots that TCR had children watching and reading not safe for work material and having VC sex with Ripper. I take it he meant that he had more than screenshots, but still, if he has proof of this, would this not be something you would post immediately to stop any harm coming to these children, as opposed to holding on to it for the sake of perpetuating Twitter drama? There was a lot of back and forth at this time, eventually concluding in Moth also being suspended from Twitter, which TCR chalked up to him falsely accusing multiple people of being criminals. A few days after this, TCR tweeted that someone sent him Moth's Discord server audit logs from March, and something that had been long speculated was confirmed. Moth definitely deleted evidence of freely accessible gore from his server. The only new additions to the plagued Moth repertoire from this point in time is that he began to abuse DMCA against detractors, something he ironically accused Slimebeast of doing. He even got creative and started pretending to be Slimebeast to DMCA himself. I have no idea what the objective of this was, as obviously Slimebeast wouldn't copyright strike himself, but you know, with Plagued Moth, it's like I'm just my brain's melting, frankly. I don't know. On August 7th, I had both TCR and Moth on my stream over on the Tom Dark channel, and though it wasn't very productive, it did result in a kind of temporary ceasefire between the two, which did not last very long. In September, Slimebeast posted a video doing some math based on a Reddit post of Moth's wife, and concluded that they first got together when she was 26 and he was 17. Moth and his wife both responded to these accusations, essentially suggesting that they only began dating after Moth had already turned 18, which could be true, but if we go solely off of this Reddit post, that's impossible. In her post from 2019, his wife says that they hooked up almost 8 years prior, which, even if you whittle it down to just 7 years, means it happened in 2012, during which time he would have been 17 for the majority of the year. Eventually, she corrected herself and said they started dating a month after he turned 18. Later, in 2023, when Cold Raven had officially joined the group of Moth's detractors, he posted about Moth having sent gore to Lazy Bedhead, something which is very weird and just strange to do to someone, obviously. Bedhead confirmed this and added that he not only sent her gore, but also edited TikTok posts of hers spliced within that gore, which frankly, if she wanted to, could be considered some kind of death threat if she really wanted to be dramatic. Eventually, Moth responded directly to Cold Raven in a video, but whatever impact this could have had was significantly dampened by him bringing up the accusations he had seen. Here, he specifies that he hadn't seen any part of the itself, but instead had just seen the trailer for it. It's crazy that there's a trailer for that kind of thing, but you know, these people are sick in the head. This is something he'd also said during my live stream with him. While I do think this could be true, and I don't think that he is some kind of creep himself, I simply don't understand why this couldn't have been clarified much earlier, preferably without the hefty side order of random unnecessary lies he served up every single time someone brought it up to him. But keep in mind, this doesn't really explain the thing Slimebeast pointed out about the trailer for his video containing what appears to be a higher quality version of the introductory portion to the same tape he'd been repeatedly accused of possessing. But regardless, going on about this is beating a dead horse at this point. The attempts at DMCAing his opposition continued but didn't have much success, and in March 2024, he announced he'd lost his real-life job, supposedly due to harassment he received on account of what was going on online. This is unverifiable, and we have to go off his word here, but it certainly could be true. Since then, he's been repeatedly banned off of multiple platforms, but he still pretty regularly posts to his YouTube channel. However, the hope of him recapturing the same traction and clout he had a couple of years prior is simply long gone. Plagued Moth hasn't once expressed any intention to apologize, admit to the tens of times he's falsely accused people of being creeps, and instead, every time he's lied and purposely misled his own audience to make himself look better. On YouTube, you're lucky if you get a second chance after one slip-up of that caliber, but after dozens upon dozens, the only people left will be delusional sycophants and kids too young to know any better. The attempts of his to frame all of this as people gratuitously going after him, or platforms being unfair to him because of the topics he covers in his content, are transparent. Justin Wang, for example, covers plenty of shock video and adjacent topics, but his channel works just fine because his attempt isn't as gruesome or tasteless as Moth's, and he doesn't just sit and watch these videos and laugh at them as they come out. Even in the times where the criticisms he made against his detractors are fair and accurate, it doesn't suddenly justify the things he's done. Before TCR ever got on his case, he already had his Patreon taken down once for providing access to uncensored content to his followers. His business model was a castle of sand, ready to collapse on its own well before anyone had poked any holes in it. Now that it did collapse, he wants to blame everyone else. Now, I don't personally wish any ill will on the guy whatsoever, especially considering his family situation with the people he needs to support, but given he himself doesn't want to change the way he does things, I can't imagine the future holds anything different for him. Unfortunately, this is the story of Plagued Moth. I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.